So I'm introducing myself.
Are we introducing ourselves?
Are we introducing the podcast name?
Oh, yeah. Are we?
I don't know.
I don't know how to do the intro. I just know how to talk.
So, Brandy, to start off our episode today, I wanted to explore a post that one of our beautiful listeners, Katie from Queensland, shout out to you, Katie. Thank you for being part of our journey. We love having you along. She sent a post through to our socials and she wanted to check on, is this actually a thing? How valid is this? Is there any evidence behind it? So I'll read you out the post. Says, am I the only one who did not know this? Did you know you cannot have intrusive thoughts while humming? When you hum, you create a space between your thoughts and your nervous system. This helps you regulate your nervous system to feel calm and less anxious. So, naturally, I'm like, interesting. Let me do some digging because I've not seen any research into, intrusive thoughts and humming in my searches so far. So, you know what I did next? I did a deep dive because
Of course you did.
Exactly. I've got to get the evidence. I've got to make sure it's accurate before I say yes, no, maybe so, or post something on social media that potentially is going to have, positive or negative impacts, but it's going to impact people because if they trust what you're saying, there's potential for harm there.
Can I just say I'm so glad you acknowledged that because I feel like as soon as you start to put information out there, you have to be mindful and also responsible for what you are saying and putting out there for everyone to review and consider, I guess.
Exactly. So I really wanted to check this up. I wanted to give her some feedback about, what the research was suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
Unsurprisingly, there is no research to date that explores humming and intrusive thoughts.
Wild.
So firstly, I'm like, okay, red flag. I'm like, okay, let's scale it back a bit. What research is there about humming in general and thoughts? So the research that I found, there were some pretty recent studies, but they were about yoga humming. So very, very specific, wasn't about individual thoughts or, narrowing it down to intrusive thoughts, positive, negative thoughts. It was literally just about what happens within our brain, within our body when we're humming. So basically what happens is when you hum, you're stimulating the vagus nerve, which connects to our parasympathetic nervous system, and that helps us to rest, reset, calm down. Very, very nice. And with that, we can get a really, calming. Yes, I like in the post that it did say it can create a bit of a separation between our thoughts and what's going on in our nervous system and calm our body. However, the idea that humming itself can block out intrusive thoughts, there was no foundation there. So what they were talking about with thoughts is actually humming can make our thoughts more clear. And really our thoughts are just a combination of all these neurons firing in our brain. We can't shut them off and say, oh, sorry, don't want you to come in anymore. I'm just going to hum and I'm just going to no intrusive thoughts can ever get in. I did try for a few minutes. I was humming and I'm like, what can I think about? I could think about bloody anything because the humming itself can calm my brain and body, but it doesn't stop thoughts because my brain is controlling that. And I can't just sorry, I'm just going to do this humming. It's going to stop that part of my brain and happy days. So another red flag when I, was reading the science behind and how it can create that calm, but also it can't impact our thoughts itself. Yeah, sure. When we're calm, we can create the space to logically think out what might be going on in that thought because not all intrusive thoughts, as you were talking about earlier, Brandy, are bad. They don't have to be negative intrusive thoughts. They could be positive ones as well. So I was very, very concerned.
We can see.
I know. I
can feel it.
I know.
Tell me more.
Well, I'm thinking, okay, this is out there on social media. Hundreds of thousands of people are seeing this, potentially taking this on board as, I need to do this. This is a strategy for me. That's a really big responsibility. I'm scared because now what if that person goes and they try it just like I did? Because I need to put myself in as a case study tried and tested, and I can confirm did not stop anything from coming in. I could think about whatever I wanted to. But it was nice, bit of vibration on the brain. But we won't go into my experience. We'll go back to the many, many thousands of people that are viewing this. So let's say someone views this and they decide, okay, this is what I need to do. I've been struggling with my intrusive thoughts. I need to use this strategy. Like, this person's put it out there. I trust them. They go and do it, and then there's no impact. Or it's not the impact that they think. Like, it doesn't stop the intrusive thoughts. Maybe it helps them to deal with it and cope with it a bit better. Amazing. That's a great result. But it doesn't stop the thoughts. And putting that message out there that this will stop intrusive thoughts is really damaging. If you've got someone that is desperate to try anything to stop that noise, to, calm those thoughts that might be really distressing, and then you load on another disappointment when that strategy doesn't work, that can be really a dangerous place for that person to be in. And so, Brandy and I feel the responsibility of, when we talk about things, we endeavor to be able to back that up. I went and did a bit of a deep dive into the person that was putting out this post. There was some interesting training involved, may I say. I can get it up. I don't know if I need to, but let's just say that the qualifications were 22 hours of watching videos online to be able to be qualified in this certain treatment approach. So what confidence I would put in their ability to be able to disseminate good information to the public, I can't say that I put much value in it. And I just think it's interesting that these people think that they can get away with it as well. Like, it's scary that, like, I can say anything and my followers will believe me. And that is terrifying.
Yeah.
That's cult-like to me. Like, I feel like there's
we see it all the time, though.
You do.
Like, we see it from, like, big influencers, whether it's, I bought this product and this is the best thing ever. Mm-hmm. Or go eat this and you'll lose 5 pounds, or whatever they're saying, right? It is scary. But I think one thing you need to highlight is that your credentials in this as well, and being able to assess and research.
Okay, so my qualifications, yes, I'll put this out. It wasn't a 22-hour video courses that I was watching online to get my certification.
No.
I have an Bachelor of Psychology honours, Class 1A. Did well. I'm proud of myself. Have a PhD in psychology, and I have my clinical masters in psychology as well. So I've done a lot of research. I know about evidence-based practice and actually being a good scientist practitioner, which basically means you have a relationship going on where the research informs your practice, and then also when you're practicing, working with clients, you can use that information to actually contribute back to the scientific community to provide more evidence to a treatment being effective, or something that maybe didn't go so well. So there's a lot of responsibility, and there's all this talk of, like, okay, presenting the evidence, using your position ethically, practicing ethically, and it really gets my hackles up when I'm like, oh my gosh, this person is saying these things that have no scientific basis, and people will believe it. And fair enough. Like, we can believe things that we read all the time. You might see an infomercial and they're like, this thing will be the end to your cleaning woes. You'll never have to do this again. You're like, you want to believe it. But it's scary if it goes wrong.
100%. But do you know where my mind goes in all of this now?
Tell me.
We're expecting that people have good intentions and integrity.
Yeah.
So if you start something, or you put something out there and you're like, I'm getting a following. I'm getting like sponsorships.
Yeah.
I'm starting to generate an income.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't ethically believe it, or it's not your values or anything, but you're like, this is an opportunity. Like, it's giving me this flexibility. It's giving me money, whatever it is. And some people will have no qualms in doing that.
Yes.
I think the difference and what I'm really feeling is that that's not a position that you or I would ever be in, because integrity and our personal values are fundamental to everything that we do.
Exactly.
Along with our social justice. Just to add that in as well.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing and what I'm thinking is that's the danger as well, that we can't just assume that people are trying to do the right thing by you, or that they're trying to actually provide you with education or to do right by you, essentially.
Yes. They might have a questionable moral compass, which points to anything that's going to benefit them. And in this situation, obviously the post itself isn't very harmful. Like if someone goes and tries it, worst case scenario is it's probably not going to work because.
Well, I'm thinking it may work for someone that doesn't have a busy brain.
That's
like
true.
If you have the ability to think about one thing, okay, go hum. And then you're probably thinking about the gaps in between or whatever it is.
Yeah.
For me, no.
Yes.
And I haven't even done it.
And also I think like an important thing is this post was about we're going to stop this, as if an intrusive thought is the worst thing.
Yeah.
If anyone, knows about acceptance and commitment therapy, Brandy and I were talking about this earlier. We don't actually have to push away all of our, thoughts or feelings that come to mind. So let's say, I had something, I'm handing it to Brandy, she hands it back to me. We could hand it back and forth. And this is the way that sometimes people try to push away any distress or, a thought that comes into mind. But actually, a thought is a thought. It doesn't have to control your life. We don't have to actually evaluate whether it's right or wrong if there's evidence for it. We can simply say, yep, our mind has created this. I don't have to accept it. I can just accept that it exists, and that's, that's okay. There's lots of different strategies in order to cope with distress. But in this post saying that we're just stopping it, like this is, the whole solution to intrusive thoughts is we hum and they don't exist.
Imagine going to you're being in a crisis, right? All I can think about is that you see something happen, someone's maybe anxious or something.
Yeah.
And their technique is, okay, let's hum.
Yep.
And it's like their expectation is that the humming is then going to be revolutionary and change.
Yes.
And look, maybe it will help to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's individual focused, right?
Exactly.
There's so many different techniques out there. What works for you might not work for me, etc.
Yep.
But I do agree with you. It's around the language of, if it was positioned as this is a technique that might be useful for you, you could try it.
Yes.
I accept that. And I think, do you know what? We should be promoting any technique that helps anyone, right?
Yep.
And this isn't just for our neurodiversity community, right? It's everyone.
Yeah.
I then think about the language of it's framed that an intrusive thought is a negative thing, that this is what you have to do and this will resolve it. And it's almost like giving the illusion that this is the only pathway and the right thing to do. And then you go on the profile and you look at the context and you go,
interesting.
I don't know how much advice I would take from you, but that's me personally.
Yes, because I was giving them the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, I'll look into their credentials, see what backing they have.
Why are we like this?
But I know why. Why are we like this? But something you said really sparked something before when you were talking about, things being good or bad. I know I mentioned it before, but when you said it, I was like, ooh, this also relates to our emotions. So when people label certain emotions as bad and certain emotions as good emotions are just emotions. Like at any time, in different contexts, different emotions are actually valid and relevant and useful as well. So labeling things as good or bad, positive or negative can actually be a barrier to us being able to accept, cope with, move beyond that situation, whether it's an intrusive thought or a certain type of emotion or even experience something intensely. Because I know we get quite passionate about things. I don't know if you've realised, just a touch in this episode so far.
Yes.
But not everything has to be put into a good or bad box.
No.
It can just be what it is.
See, is it weird that I don't put things into a good or bad box. Like I don't even have that in my brain. And that concept to me I find really interesting because obviously people do that, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just reflecting and thinking about it and I don't. I'm just kind of like, I think it's probably because I did get really involved and I did a lot of research and I actually really like the acceptance. Oh, I keep calling it ACT.
Yeah,
what does it stand for?
ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy.
Thank you.
ACT,
that's how I refer to it in my brain.
Yes.
And I just, like, an emotion is an emotion. It passes like everything. Probably change in a day, a week, whatever it is. But I think you just process and you reflect and then I just move on from it. So I think it's even interesting from that perspective that I don't ever put it into the good or bad box.
And I wonder, and I'm delving deep here because we love to do this.
Yeah.
I wonder where that stems from. Like that some people do put those into good and bad. And actually the first thing that comes to mind is maybe, they've experienced a trauma whereby displaying certain emotions around certain people were unsafe. So that becomes an unsafe emotion and it gets put into this, we don't want to go there, we don't want to feel this because feeling this makes me vulnerable to, it could be abuse, it could be neglect, it could be a whole range of things. So from that perspective, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure that there's lots of other examples we could use here. But I also wonder, and this is where my brain kind of went first, is like growing up as a neurodivergent child, potentially, obviously not recognizing it at the time and understanding how our brains work, whether the experience that, ourselves and other children get where they're judged or made to feel less than or different makes them push back a little bit on like what's good, what's bad, and have just that self-acceptance of like, I am who I am, or like this emotion is what it is and it doesn't actually have to be, bad or something that I need to be afraid of or judge in any way.
Well, that feeds right into my theory, if I'd be completely honest with you. I think obviously the way that we grow up, the environment that we're in, that does shape who we are because that's in our developmental years, right? I was very fortunate that I grew up in a beautiful home. Like my parents were still together, like loved me, cared for me, a very, very healthy environment.
Yeah.
My parents also allowed me to, like, there were boundaries and like I had rules. So I'm not saying it was free range or anything like that, but I was given responsibility and allowed to have my own thoughts and have my own opinions. And it was a safe space of where I could actually talk about things, or like sometimes we'd debate things and it would be fun type of thing. But that was a safe place for me and I never had any concerns or I was never told that any emotion was bad or that I shouldn't be that way. It was more about understanding what was going on for me and what emotion that was and how I felt.
Yes.
And there was a lot of talking and a lot of communication. But I think for me, because it was never like, that's bad, you don't do that or don't do that ever, it was kind of understanding the why behind it, like what's going on.
Yes.
And all of that communication and conversation is just acknowledging, okay, we have emotions, we feel things. That's okay. But what's actually going on and resolving that rather than just, no, bad.
Yes. So if we're linking it back to the humming situation, like exploring in that moment what's going on for you when you're experiencing that intrusive thought. Is it bringing up a bad memory? Is it bringing up body sensations that you don't like? Like what is the purpose of trying to push this away? And by understanding that, we can actually get to the root of the problem instead of being like, the intrusive thought's the problem. It's like, actually, no, maybe you experience.
They give us character. It's our personality.
I mean, every time Brandy asks me about my intrusive thoughts and I'm like, don't go there, girlfriend. Like,
I'm actually not allowed to ask her about her intrusive thoughts.
She's not.
Behind the camera.
We tried to go there one time I could never have recovered from it if it went live.
No, definitely not. But can I just say, like, they're sometimes really funny, and I always voice mine because I'm like, if I'm thinking it, then so should you.
Yeah.
And it would be like the most ridiculous thing. Like I was swimming at the baths with one of my friends, and the waves were coming in, and like we're literally in like this whirlpool because it's so rough.
Yeah.
And like the waves are just knocking like seaweed, and it was quite foul.
Yeah.
But anyway, and I was like, I popped my little head up, and I was like, imagine if there was a shark in here right now. And she's like, Brandy, no. And we're swimming around. We can't see anything because the water's so murky. And it's like that type of stuff.
Yes.
And it's like there's no harm. I mean, I don't care. But it's funny.
Yes.
And I just come up with the most ridiculous things that, like, honestly, like, for example, I just thought of another one which I thought was a bit delulu. But we're sitting at a table and there's like a bird's nest above. And I'm like, we're all going to get sea lice on us now, aren't we? And people are just like, where do you come up with this type of stuff?
Yes. But there's a logical train of thought that's preceded that.
But it's like they can be funny. Like it's and it's personality, and it's like yeah. I just refuse to accept that you should never have an intrusive thought.
Yeah. Or try to push them all away because, like you said, they can be enjoyable. And when you were talking about like the shark situation, I'm also someone that will call it like, oh, imagine if like, you know, like the plane crashed right now. Like what would we do? No. You know, like all those kind of things. And then you have other people that are very much like, you've said it out loud, now it's going to come true. And I'm always like, I'll tempt fate. I'll put it out there. It hasn't happened yet. Like,
I can't imagine our brain's not working like that though. Like
the chaotic like transitions from one thought to the other.
Just the ability to even entertain yourself, right? Like, I feel like I always thought, having ADHD, and I was quite confronted by it at first. And now I can't actually imagine a life where I don't have it. Like I feel like I've just really accepted myself.
Yes.
I found the light in it. There's challenges. Of course.
Exactly.
But you know what? Life would be boring, in my opinion, now.
And, you know, everyone is living their own life with their own experiences. This is literally the only brain that we've ever known and the only brain that we are going to know throughout our life.
And be kind.
100%. And it's so freeing. I can't even remember half the stuff we talked about on the podcast because we have just the wildest conversations. Like Brandy and I, we can just be talking on the phone for 2 hours. I'm like, you know, well, we better stop now because we're going to run out of content. But we'll have these wild conversations. So sometimes I forget what we've actually spoken about. But the moral of the story is that it can be quite freeing in a lot of ways. You get the diagnosis, you know, some people are afraid of labels. Completely understand because in the past that has been a lot of stigma and there is a lot of stigma still attached to certain types of diagnoses. And, you know, some people push back from the medical model 100% because, you know, all brains are valid and they're beautiful. We don't need to necessarily pathologize, but also sometimes having a label is what we need to get some support or understanding. And for me, having that diagnosis, I was like, oh, so validating. Like now when people are like, oh my gosh, Erin, like you're always so like uplifting and just so much full of energy. Like, yeah, that's just me. But a part of that I can look at and I'm like, oh, that's part of my ADHD. I love that.
I love that. Can I actually ask you a question? I've never asked you this and this is the first time on film asking film. I don't like that word.
I mean, we are technically on film, on camera.
On our podcast.
Yes.
Live.
We're live.
Not quite. But anyway, I'm getting way off where I want to go. Obviously, with all of your knowledge, all of your education, and your experience, why do you think, in a way, it took you so long to go through the process, or what really motivated you? Because I think one thing we haven't disclosed on here that your diagnosis is actually quite like fairly new, like you're not years into the process at all.
No.
So I think what I actually would love to know is what made you go and get diagnosed? Because you knew, obviously, but what pushed you?
Well, I would say like, you know how we talked about early on in our podcast around perception of what ADHD looks like. For a long time, it was very much little boys, busy, you know, maybe being naughty in the classroom, X, Y, Z. I hadn't really thought about the way my brain and my body worked in that sense from like trying to understand it until I was much older, because I'm coasting by just fine. There's nothing that like I'm really too worried about, whatever. So for me, I think not having the insight, or maybe, being a teenager, you being a child, you're very ego focused, like your life is your experience and you're kind of like, oh, everyone thinks like this or whatever. So I wasn't thinking that it was different in any way. I was just like, oh, this is just how my brain works. It's fine as it is. Then obviously as I was learning more about it, doing psychology, I was like, well, they do say it's a bit of a danger zone because you could diagnose yourself with many, many things. And I'm sure I've been through lots of the disorders and be like, oh yeah, does that fit me? Yes. And parts.
People always joke about like it's always the people that are studying
psychology
that need help.
Oh, well.
But
I mean, to give you some context, people, there was like 700-800 people that started off in my psychology degree in undergrad, many. 20 of those per year go on to do clinical psychology.
Wild.
So if you've got 700 people every single year going through the program and you're whittling it down to 20, at the end of the day, when you have that qualifications, ideally it's the people that you would hopefully trust to be able to support you.
Definitely.
So I have value in that. But I agree, there's many people that get into psychology because they're healing their own wounds. And I mean, if that's part of your process,
for them,
all power to you, but you need to make sure that you're in a good place before you can be like, I can support others, because that's a big privilege and responsibility. So as I was learning more about it, I'm like, this is very relevant for me. And having a son that got diagnosed, and many people have that experience, their child gets diagnosed and they're like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense, because obviously they haven't been, made in a vacuum over here where it's like, none of your genetics matters. Like your brain just works how it works. So for me, it was having that compassion, understanding, like through Ollie's experience, through my learnings as well. But it was really when I thought, I've talked about it around work, when my capacity to cope just outweighed my natural coping mechanisms, where I'm like, I really actually need to go and explore this. And if it is valid, if I meet the criteria, then I would like to try some medication to be able to support me. Lo and behold, I'm sure that like most people that know me wouldn't be surprised, I was diagnosed with the combined type. And that was really the stepping stone for me to just be like, I just need some extra help in my afternoons, particularly around work, but just to be present. And it is so freeing, because my experience is I can now sit across from someone, or kind of side to side, because we're not directly facing. My workplace is set up to, for people who may not like very intense eye contact, to be able to face kind of off to the side a little bit. It's very nice. Now I can actually target my thoughts how I want them to, for the most part. I mean, it's not a cure, right? It's supporting me, but it just means that I don't have to have those moments where I'm like, crap, my brain caught one thing that they said and I've gone off onto a tangent, and now I feel like I'm not present, and that makes me upset because I want to be there for them and I don't want to think about myself in that process. In that time that I'm with them, this is about them. It's about their experience. Sure, my brain is going to, connect the dots, get the context, understand their story and be able to feed that back and say, am I right here in terms of my understanding? Have I misinterpreted something? So that's really important to me, to be able to gather all that information, to do my job the best that I can. Now I feel more confident in being like, I can be present. I don't have to worry about one keyword linking me onto these random thoughts, and then the client being there ready for me to respond, and me feeling like whatever I'm going to reflect back isn't actually going to adequately explain and give justice to the energy that they've given me to give me that response. So for me, it's like, I want to give back as much as they're giving to me in terms of energy and focus. So that's where it kind of went to, like that I not only did it for me to understand my brain better, to get the support, But in a lot of ways, my clients motivated me to be able to go on this journey, and also sitting there and doing the assessment for others and recognizing, oh, yeah, I do that, and I do that, and I do that. Oh, that is me. Actually gave me a bit more validation, because I think for a long time I was gaslighting myself into maybe not. Oh, I'm just reading too much into it. I mean, we've all been there. Most of us have been there.
Some of us are still there.
That's right. So I'm going to put it out there. Thank you to my clients who facilitated this journey, because it has been a really great stone that I've turned over in my life, and a new chapter where, I don't know, I feel like I can just give myself permission to just be who I am in a lot of ways, where before I might have like judged a little bit of that part of myself.
Oh, that's lovely.